Where are they now? Child Stars, the kids who grew up on camera. Written by Barron Darby. Narrated by Jessica Ann Bogart. A note on this book. It is a work of biography drawn entirely from published sources, and it profiles people who chose to live a part of their lives in front of us. It is written with affection and with respect. Where the public record is painful, this telling slows down and lowers its voice. Where a person has asked, in their own words, to be left alone, or to be seen a certain way, this book honors that. Nothing here is invented. The point is not to gawk at who these people used to be. The point is to find out who they became, and to be a little kinder to the kid on the screen now that we know what it cost. Introduction: the cost of growing up famous. Every one of us has a face we remember from childhood that was not a relative, not a neighbor, not a teacher. It was a face on a screen. A kid about our age beamed into the living room every week, saying the lines we wished we were quick enough to say. Living the life we watched from the couch with a bowl of cereal going soft in our hands. We grew up with those kids. And then, the way childhood does, it ended, and the screen moved on to other faces, and we got jobs and mortgages and gray hair, and somewhere in the back of the mind a question sat quietly for 20 or 30 years, waiting for somebody to ask it. Whatever happened to them? Here is the thing nobody tells you about being a famous child. The fame is not the hard part. The hard part is what happens to a person who peaks at 12. Most of us get to be clumsy and awkward and wrong in private. In middle school hallways, nobody filmed, and we get to grow out of it, where no one is keeping score. A child star does not get that. A child star does their growing up on a public stage, and then, right around the age the rest of us are just getting started, the world quietly decides it is finished with them. Imagine being told at 19 that the best and most important thing you will ever do is already behind you. Imagine the whole planet agreeing on it. Some of them broke under that. We will be honest about the ones who did, because pretending otherwise would be a lie, and because their stories are the ones that teach us the most. But here is what surprised me. The deeper I went, most of them did not break. Most of them did something far more interesting and far harder than staying famous. They grew up. They walked away on purpose. They went to college or started companies or raised children or learned, slowly and at real cost, how to be a whole adult after a childhood that was anything but normal. The comeback is a good story. But the quiet second act, the one where a former child star becomes a photographer or a watchmaker or a race car driver, or simply a happy and private person, is the better one. So let us go find them, the kids we grew up with. Let us find out where they are now. We begin with the one who started it all. Before there were Disney factories or Nickelodeon machines, there were families who turned their children into stars. And we have to begin with the brightest and the saddest of them all, because his story is, in a way, the whole story. The reason a book like this needs to exist at all. The Jackson 5 are where the whole conversation has to bow its head, because they gave us the most famous child star who has ever lived, and the most cautionary tale of all. 5 brothers out of Gary, Indiana, drilled relentlessly by their father, exploded onto the scene at the turn of the 1970s, and at the center of them was a little boy named Michael, maybe 10 or 11, singing lead with a feeling no child should have access to, a voice that sounded like it had already lived 3 lifetimes. They were a phenomenon. I Want You Back, a BC, the screaming crowds, the lunch boxes, the cartoon. And here is the thing we cannot say lightly. Michael Jackson spent the rest of his life telling anyone who would listen that the price of that stardom was his entire childhood, that he never got to be a kid, that he was working when other children were playing, and that the hole it left in him never closed. He became the biggest entertainer in the history of the world, and he also became the living, breaking embodiment of the central wound of this whole book, the child who peaked before he grew, and who spent his adulthood trying, sometimes in ways the world found alarming, to reclaim a boyhood that had been taken from him. His life and his legacy remain the subject of enormous and painful public debate, and this book will not try to settle it. He died in 2009, at 50, far too soon. We hold the complexity of him without resolving it, and we let the little boy with the impossible voice stand for the cost of all of it. And where are his brothers now? Still here mostly, still carrying the name. Jackie, Jermaine, and Marlon have continued to perform and to tend the family legacy across the decades. But the Jacksons, too, have learned that the screen does not promise old age, because in September of 2024, they lost Tito, the quiet brother, the guitarist, the steady one, who died suddenly at 70 of a heart attack while driving across the country. He had finally, late in life, stepped out front with his own blues music, the shy middle brother becoming a frontman in his 70s. His passing gathered the surviving family in grief once again. The Jackson Five were the brightest child stars America ever produced, and their story holds, in one family, the whole spectrum, the dizzying height and the deepest cost, and the long roll call of loss. We remember them with awe and with tenderness both. Part 1, The Sitcom Kids, Jaleel White. For a generation, he was not a person. He was a sound, the snort of a laugh, the suspenders hiked to the ribs, the voice that could peel paint. Did I do that? Jaleel White played Steve Urkel on Family Matters, and the character was so enormous, so completely swallowing of everything around it, that for years the young man inside the costume could not get the rest of the world to see him at all. Here is what people forget. Urkel was supposed to appear once. One episode, a one-time guest, the annoying neighbor kid. He tested through the roof, and within a season, the show had quietly rebuilt itself around a 12-year-old in horn-rimmed glasses. That is a staggering thing to put on a child, to make him the engine of a hit network show, and Jaleel White carried it for 9 years. The cost was a familiar one. He has spoken, as an adult, about how completely the character erased him, how hard it was to be taken seriously as a grown actor, when half the country still heard that snort the moment he walked into a room. And where is he now? He did the wise thing. He stopped fighting the character and started building around it. He went to UCLA and graduated. He became a working voice actor, including a long run as the voice of Sonic the Hedgehog, which is a beautiful kind of full circle. A man known for one unforgettable voice making a whole second career out of his real one. He competed on Dancing with the Stars. He launched a cannabis brand. And in recent years, he did the thing that takes the most courage of all. He wrote it down. He told his own story, in his own words. Finally, the author of The Kid in the Suspenders instead of his prisoner. The snort was never the whole of him. It just took the rest of us 30 years to find that out. Soleil Moon Frye. She was Punky Brewster, and if you are of a certain age, you can still see the mismatched sneakers, the bandana, the bright scrambled colors of a little girl who decided the world was going to take her, exactly as she was. Soleil Moon Frye was a tiny powerhouse of optimism on 1980s television, and the remarkable thing about her story is how much of that optimism turned out to be real, and how it survived. Most child stars lose the footage. Soleil did the opposite. As a teenager in the 1990s, moving through a Hollywood full of other famous kids, she did something almost nobody else thought to do. She carried a video camera everywhere and filmed it all: the parties, the heartbreaks, the friends who would and would not make it out. Decades later, she opened those tapes and turned them into a documentary called Kid 90, and it is one of the most honest things ever made about what that particular childhood actually felt like from the inside. It is funny, and it is devastating, and it does not flinch. Where is she now? She reprised Punky Brewster in a 2021 revival, a grown woman playing the grown-up version of the little girl who raised a generation. She is an author. She is a photographer with a real and serious eye. She is a mother of 4, an advocate for the planet, and by every public account, a person who took the strange gift of an early camera childhood and made it into a tool for telling the truth. The little girl in the mismatched sneakers grew up to be the one holding the camera steady while everyone else looked away. That tracks. That tracks completely. Raven-Symoné. She arrived almost impossibly early. She was 3 years old on The Cosby Show, a toddler who could hold the screen against some of the biggest stars in television, and the camera simply loved her, the way it loves only a handful of people in a generation. By the 2000s, she was the center of her own universe. That's So Raven, a Disney Channel juggernaut about a teenager who could see the future, and a whole cohort of kids grew up on her the way an earlier one grew up on Punky. The future the show could never have predicted was her own. Raven-Symoné grew into a woman determined to define herself entirely on her own terms, and she did, loudly, and sometimes against considerable pushback. She talked openly about her life and her identity on her own schedule and in her own words. She came back to the role that made her, in Raven's home, this time playing the mother, the psychic teenager grown into a psychic mom, which is its own quiet kind of poetry. In 2020, she married Miranda Madej, and she has built a public life since that looks, more than anything, like a person who is finally comfortable. The toddler the camera loved spent her whole life being looked at. The adult decided she would be the one to say what we were looking at. After a childhood like hers, that is not vanity. That is survival, and it is hard won. Interlude, the trick of the frozen face. There is a strange cruelty built into the way we remember child stars, and it is worth naming before we go any further. We freeze them. In our minds, they stay exactly the age they were when we loved them most. Macaulay Culkin is 8, his hands on his cheeks, forever. Mara Wilson is 6, reading at the kitchen table in Matilda, forever. We are allowed to age. They are not. And so when we finally see them as adults, there is this small involuntary jolt, almost an offense, as if they have done something to us by growing up. They have not, of course. They have only done the one thing every living person does, but it explains the whole strange industry of the "where are they now?" the thing you are listening to right now. We are not really asking where they went. We know where they went. They went into ordinary adult life, the same place we all go. What we are really asking is something more tender and more selfish at the same time. We are asking the child on the screen to tell us that the years did not hurt them too badly. We are asking them to be all right, partly for their sake, and partly, if we are honest, for our own. Some of them are. Let us go see. Part 2. The Movie Kids. Macaulay Culkin. He was, for one impossible stretch at the start of the 1990s, the most famous child on the planet. Home Alone was not a hit. It was a phenomenon, the kind of cultural event that happens to a person about once a decade, and it happened to a boy who was 10. By 12, he was one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood, child or adult, and everything that tends to go wrong when that much money and that much attention land on a child, with the adults around him pulled in too many directions, went wrong. He has been open, as a grown man, about the parts of it that hurt, the family disputes, the lost time, the long shadow of being the kid from that movie. Here is what is easy to miss in his story. He did not crash. He stepped back. He looked at the machine that wanted to keep using him, and he simply walked off the lot, took years away, did exactly as he pleased. He started a comedy rock band devoted entirely to songs about pizza, which is the single most well-adjusted thing a former megastar has ever done. A man using his fame on purpose for something gloriously, deliberately small. He made his way back on his own terms, in projects like American Horror Story, chosen because he wanted them and not because he needed them. Where is he now? He is a father. He and the actress Brenda Song have built a quiet family life out of the public eye, which for a man who lost his own childhood to the camera is not a small thing. It is the whole thing. In 2023, he got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and he brought his kids, and the boy who was once alone in that big house on the screen stood there surrounded by the family he chose. If you only know the cheeks and the scream, you are missing the best part. The best part is that he got out, and he got out okay. Mara Wilson. She was the little girl you trusted instantly. Matilda, Miracle on 34th Street, the youngest daughter in Mrs. Doubtfire. Mara Wilson had a quality almost impossible to fake or teach, a kind of grave intelligence behind the eyes. And for a few years in the 1990s, she was the child actress America wanted to adopt. And then she stopped. Mostly she stopped because she chose to, and partly because Hollywood, in its ugliest reflex, loses interest in girls right around the time they stop being cute and start becoming people. But here's the difference between Mara Wilson and a sadder version of this story. She was not discarded. She left, and then she went and built a life made of words. The grave little girl grew up to be a writer, a genuinely good one, and she wrote a memoir with one of the great titles in the genre, Where Am I Now? She has become one of the most clear-eyed public voices on what childhood fame does to a developing brain, and on mental health more broadly, speaking about her own anxiety and the loss of her mother with a candor that helps people she will never meet. Where is she now? Exactly where she wants to be, which is the rarest answer in this entire book. She is a writer and an advocate who occasionally lends her voice to a project on her own terms because she feels like it. She solved the riddle that breaks so many child stars. She figured out that the kid on the screen was a job she used to have, not a cage she had to live in forever. The girl we trusted turned out to be trustworthy about the hardest thing of all, the truth of her own life. Haley Joel Osment. I see dead people. 2 years old when he started in commercials, 11 when he whispered that line in The Sixth Sense and earned an Academy Award nomination for it, Haley Joel Osment was the rare child actor who was not just adorable, but genuinely, eerily great, holding his own opposite Bruce Willis and Tom Hanks and a robot future in AI. He was the gold standard, and the gold standard carries its own specific weight, Because when you are that good that young, the only direction the story is allowed to go in the public imagination is down. Except his did not. This is the plot twist almost nobody noticed, because it is undramatic in the best possible way. Haley Joel Osment simply kept working. He went to film school. He grew up, physically, into a different-looking adult than the cherubic boy we remembered, which confused people who expected the frozen face, and he just kept acting through all of it. Voice work, indie films, comedies. He has been quietly, steadily, everywhere. Where is he now? Busier than most actors his age who were never famous as children at all. Recent years have brought him a serial killer turn in the second season of Wednesday, a role in Poker Face, a part in the Happy Gilmore sequel, and the ongoing job that delights a particular kind of fan to no end. For more than 20 years, he has been the voice of Sora, the hero of the Kingdom Hearts video games, meaning an entire younger generation knows his voice intimately and has no idea it belongs to the kid who saw dead people. He did the thing that is somehow hardest of all in Hollywood. He just never stopped, never crashed, and never made it about anything other than the work. The eerie great kid grew into a working actor, which is exactly what he always was. Jonathan Taylor Thomas. For a few years in the 1990s, he was the face on every bedroom wall and every magazine cover aimed at teenagers. Home Improvement made him a household name, and as the voice of young Simba in The Lion King, he is, technically and permanently, part of one of the most beloved films ever made. Jonathan Taylor Thomas was as big as a teen idol got, and then, near the height of all of it, he did the single most countercultural thing a person in his position can do. He left on purpose. He stepped back from acting to go to college, to actually study, to read books and sit in lecture halls and be, for a while, an ordinary, anonymous young man. He attended Harvard and Columbia. He chose privacy with a discipline that frustrated an industry built on the opposite, and he has held that line for decades, granting almost no interviews, living quietly, refusing to feed the machine that would happily have consumed the rest of his life. Where is he now? That is gloriously almost the whole point of him. We do not entirely know, because he decided that was none of our business, and he made it stick. We know he stayed close to his old Home Improvement family, that he turned up to direct several episodes of Last Man Standing for his former television dad, that he is reportedly content and out of the spotlight. In a book full of people who fought to be seen as more than the kid on the screen, Jonathan Taylor Thomas answered the question differently. He decided the kid on the screen had earned him the freedom to disappear, and he spent it. There is something almost heroic about a famous person who looked at all of it and simply said, "No, thank you. I would like my actual life now." He took it. Good for him. Interlude. Not every story lands soft. If this book only told you about the ones who got out clean, it would be lying to you, and it would be boring. And worst of all, it would not answer the question you actually came here with. Because the honest truth is that the question, whatever happened to them, carries a little fear inside it. When we ask where a child star ended up, part of us is bracing. We remember the headlines that were not happy ones. We remember the mugshots that ran next to the old publicity photos, the cruel side-by-sides, the public unravelings we watched, and God forgive us, sometimes enjoyed. So we are going to tell those parts too, not to pile on and not to dig through the wreckage for sport. The tabloids already did that, and they did it without mercy, and we are not going to be the tabloids. We are going to tell it the way you would tell it about someone you grew up with, someone from the old neighborhood, with the details left where they belong and the human being kept in view. because the kid who struggled was a kid too. The kid who struggled is the whole reason this matters. A childhood spent on camera is not a guarantee of a soft landing. For some of them, it was the opposite, and they deserve to be more than a punchline now. Part 3. The Harder Roads and the Reinventions. Frankie Muniz, Malcolm in the Middle, put him at the center of one of the smartest comedies of its era, a genius kid drowning in a chaotic family. And Frankie Muniz was wonderful in it, the still, exhausted eye of a very loud storm. The show ran for years, and when it ended, Muniz did something that baffled everyone. He more or less quit acting at the height of it and went racing cars. Not as a hobby or a stunt. He got a real ride, competed in open-wheel series, chased the thing all the way down for years. It was not a smooth road. He has been open about hard stretches in the years that followed, including health scares, and a period, he says, he can barely remember. But the through line of Frankie Muniz is a man who kept choosing his own strange path instead of the one Hollywood drew for him. In recent years, he came back to the screen on his own terms, took a full-time ride in NASCAR truck racing, became a father, and signed on to a revival of the very show that made him. Where is he now? Racing, acting, raising his son, and by his own account happier and clearer than he was during the fame itself. He is the reinventor of this book. He proved you can leave the thing you are famous for, fall down a few times out there in the dark, and still find your way back to a life that is actually yours. Amanda Bynes. This one we have to handle gently because it is recent and it is real and she is still living it. Amanda Bynes was a comedy machine as a kid, the youngest performer to have her own sketch show on a major network, and she carried that into genuine movie stardom as a young woman, in films people still quote. She was, by any honest measure, enormously talented. And then, in the full glare of the social media age, she went through a long and very public mental health crisis, the kind that used to happen in private and now happens in front of everyone, in real time, with the whole internet watching and commenting. We are not going to walk you through the worst days. You may remember some of them, and if you do, the kind thing to do with that memory is to set it down. What matters more is the part that came after, the part the headlines lost interest in because recovery is quiet and recovery does not trend. She was placed under a conservatorship to get her stable and safe. And in 2022, after years of work, that conservatorship was ended by her own request, with her own clear voice. Where is she now? Out of that legal arrangement, focused on her health, having studied cosmetology, building a smaller and more private life one ordinary day at a time. Her story is not finished, and it is not ours to finish for her. But the most important thing to say about Amanda Bynes is the simplest. She is still here. After everything, she is still here, and she is trying, and that deserves something better from all of us than the old cruelty. It deserves to be rooted for. Fred Savage. For a generation, his face was nostalgia itself. The Wonder Years was a show about looking back, and Fred Savage was Kevin Arnold, the boy at the center of it, the kid whose growing up was narrated as memory even while it happened. He was one of the most recognizable child actors of his time, and unlike many, he did not vanish as an adult. He quietly became a successful and in-demand television director, working steadily behind the camera for years, which is usually where this kind of story turns into a happy one. This one got complicated. In 2022, his return to a Wonder Years revival ended abruptly after workplace allegations that he has disputed, and the production parted ways with him. We are not going to litigate that here. The reporting is public, the matter is contested, and a narrator is not a judge. What we can tell you is the only thing this book ever promises to tell you, which is where the road went next. Front-of-camera work has been scarce for him since, and in a turn nobody would have scripted, he has reportedly stepped into an entirely different world, launching a business in the authentication and valuation of fine watches, trading the soundstage for the loop and the workbench. It is one of the strangest and most uncertain second acts in this whole book, and we include it on purpose, because not every story lands soft, and pretending otherwise would cheat you. The boy who narrated a nation's nostalgia grew into a complicated adulthood, the way real people do. Where he goes from here, none of us knows yet. That is the honest answer. And sometimes the honest answer is all there is. Hilary Duff. We will end part 3 on a softer landing, because they are real too. Hilary Duff was Lizzie McGuire, the beating heart of the Disney Channel, at the exact moment the Disney Channel became a machine for minting stars, and she rode that into a pop career and a movie career and the particular pressure cooker fame of being a role model to millions of girls before she was old enough to vote. That is a setup for a hard story. Hers, mostly, was not. She grew up about as gracefully as the situation allowed, stepped back when she needed to, and built the thing that is hardest to build out of a childhood like that, which is a normal, sturdy, adult life. Where is she now? Starring in television again, in How I Met Your Father, the grown-up lead instead of the kid's sidekick, raising 4 children, married, settled, and as of recently teasing her first new music in years on her own clock, because she wants to, and not because a label is cracking a whip. Hilary Duff is the control group of this book, the proof that it does not have to end in wreckage or in disappearance, that sometimes the kid on the screen just simply grows up and is fine. We needed at least one of those. We needed the reminder that a happy ending is also a real ending. She is living one. Interlude. A different kind of famous. Something changed in the machine, somewhere around the turn of the century, and it is worth pausing on, because it changed what it meant to be a famous child. The kids we have talked about so far, the Culkins and the Wilsons, became famous the old way, through movies and network sitcoms, a handful of enormous shared cultural moments that the whole country watched at the same time. The next wave grew up famous in a different world. They were minted by the machines, Disney Channel and Nickelodeon, networks that had figured out how to manufacture a teen star the way a factory manufactures anything, in volume, on a schedule. With the merchandise designed before the show even aired, it made them famous faster and younger, and to a more devoted audience than almost anyone before them. And we are only now, with the help of the people who lived it, beginning to understand the price of that particular factory. A lot has come out in recent years, told by the former kids themselves, about what it was actually like inside those buildings. We are not going to sensationalize any of it, but we are going to take it seriously, because the people who came forward were brave to do it, and because the whole point of this book is to see the human being and not just the brand. So here is the generation the machine built, and where they are now, that they have grown up, and in many cases, decided to tell us the truth. Part 4. The Disney and Nickelodeon generation. Miranda Cosgrove. She was Megan on Drake and Josh, the scheming little sister, and then she was iCarly, the homemade web show star who turned out to be one of the most watched kids on the planet at the exact moment the internet was learning what it would become. Miranda Cosgrove was Nickelodeon's biggest asset for a stretch, and the interesting thing about her is how cleanly she has handled the whole thing with seemingly none of the wreckage that surrounded so many of her peers. She did the unusual and very smart thing of stepping partly out of the spotlight to go to college, studying at the University of Southern California, building a life with some ballast in it. Where is she now? Very much still working, and on her own terms. She brought iCarly back as an adult revival, played the lead in a string of films, lent her voice to animation, and has used her platform for causes she actually cares about. She is one of the quiet success stories of the Nickelodeon era, a person who came through the factory with her head on straight, and there is real value in telling that version too. Not everyone from that world has a horror story. Some of them just grew up, went to class, and kept the part of the job they loved. Josh Peck. He was the loud half of Drake and Josh, the bigger kid with the bottomless comic energy, and he was genuinely, reliably funny in a way that is much harder than it looks. What people did not know, watching him, was how much that big funny kid was struggling underneath, with his weight, with his self-image, with the particular loneliness of being a teenager whose body was a national punchline. He has been remarkably open about all of it as an adult, in a memoir and on his podcast, and that openness has become the foundation of his second act. Josh Peck did not flame out, and he did not vanish. He grew up into a working character actor, a married father, and a podcaster and author who has connected with people precisely by being honest about the hard parts. Where is he now? Steadily employed in television and film, building a real adult career out of the comic instincts he had as a kid, and using his story to talk frankly about body image and addiction and recovery. The loud, funny kid turned out to have a lot going on behind the laugh, and the grown man decided to tell us about it, which is its own kind of brave. Cole and Dylan Sprouse. Twins are a casting director's dream for child roles, two interchangeable kids to skirt the labor laws, and the Sprouse brothers worked constantly, almost from infancy, before landing The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, a Disney Channel hit that made them jointly one of the biggest acts the network had. And then, at the height of their teenage fame, they did something almost nobody in their position does. They quit, cleanly, on purpose, to go to college. They enrolled at New York University and actually studied, Dylan in video game design, Cole in archaeology. Of all things, genuinely walking away from the machine to become educated adults with interests outside of fame. Where are they now? Both came back to acting as grown men, but as a choice rather than a compulsion. Cole found a substantial second career on the teen drama Riverdale and in film. Dylan has built a steady screen career of his own and become an entrepreneur. The story of the Sprouse twins is the story of two kids who used their childhood fame to buy themselves an education and a sense of self, and then walked back into the industry on their own terms as people who had proven to themselves that they could leave. That is a healthy thing. That is the move. Jennette McCurdy. For years, she was Sam on iCarly, the tough, scrappy, hilarious best friend, beloved by an enormous audience of kids. And then she walked away from acting entirely, and for a long time, nobody outside the industry quite understood why. In 2022, she told us, in a memoir with a title so blunt it stops you in the street, "I'm glad my mom died." It became an enormous bestseller, and it is one of the most unflinching accounts ever written of what childhood fame can do when the adults who are supposed to protect a kid are the source of the harm instead. We are not going to retell her story for her, because she already told it, better than anyone else could, and that is exactly the point of her second act. Jennette McCurdy took the worst parts of her childhood and turned them into literature and into help for other people. she stepped fully out of acting and became a writer and a director, the author of her own life in the most literal sense. Where is she now? A celebrated author working behind the camera, and as of early 2025, a new mother herself, building the kind of family she did not get to have. Hers is the story that explains why this whole series tries so hard to be gentle. Because behind some of the brightest, funniest kids we ever watched, there was a child carrying something heavy, waiting years to be old enough and free enough to set it down. She set it down in public and helped a lot of people do the same. Part 5. The Ones Who Became Something Else Entirely. Mayim Bialik. She was the title character on Blossom, the quirky, big-hearted teenager in the floppy hat, one of the defining girls of early 1990s television. And then she did the most unexpected thing in this entire book. She left acting at the height of it, went to college, and earned a doctorate. A real one. Mayim Bialik became an actual neuroscientist, a PhD in the study of the human brain, while most of her former peers were still trying to book their next pilot. She came back to acting later, of course, and beautifully, as Amy Farrah Fowler on The Big Bang Theory, a neuroscientist playing a neuroscientist, which is a delicious thing for the universe to have arranged. Where is she now? She has hosted Jeopardy! She has built a media company. She writes. She advocates for science education. She does roughly 4 people's worth of careers at once. Mayim Bialik is the proof that a child star is not limited to the one thing we knew her for, that the kid in the floppy hat contained an entire scientist the whole time. She just had to go get the degree to show us. Of all the second acts in this book, hers may be the most quietly astonishing. Ron Howard. We have to reach back further for this one, because the lesson is too good to leave out. Before he was anything else, he was Opie, the freckled, fishing pole-carrying son on The Andy Griffith Show, one of the most beloved child characters in the history of American television. And then he was Richie Cunningham on Happy Days, carrying a second massive hit as a young man. By any measure, he was one of the most successful child and teen actors of his era, and he could have ridden that face for the rest of his life. Instead, he went and became one of the most successful film directors who has ever lived. Ron Howard directed Apollo 13, A Beautiful Mind, which won him the Academy Award for Best Director, Cinderella Man, Frost Nixon, and a long shelf of others, building a body of work that has nothing to do with the freckled boy and everything to do with a serious adult artist. Where is he now? Still directing, decades in, a respected elder statesman of American film, and proof of the most hopeful idea this book has to offer. The childhood is not the ceiling. For a rare few, it is barely even the beginning. Opie grew up to tell some of the biggest stories in the movies, and he did it from behind the camera, where the freckles do not show, and the only thing that matters is whether the story is any good. His always were. Part 6, The Comebacks. Drew Barrymore. If you want the whole arc of child stardom in a single human being, the rise and the fall and the long climb back, you want Drew Barrymore. She is Hollywood royalty by blood, a Barrymore, and she was 7 years old when E.T. made her one of the most famous children in the world, and then the fall came early and hard and in public. By the time she was a young teenager, she had been through nightclubs and rehab, and an emancipation from her own parents. The cautionary tale every other entry in this book is measured against. A kid who had seen and survived more by 15 than most people do in a lifetime. And here is why she is the patron saint of the second act. She did not become a tragedy. She became a mogul. She rebuilt herself as an adult, first as a movie star all over again, then as a producer with her own company that made hit after hit. then as a beauty entrepreneur, and finally, improbably and wonderfully, as the warmest host in daytime television. Where is she now? She hosts the Drew Barrymore show, where she hugs her guests and cries with them and radiates a hard-won, fully earned joy. And she anchors a revived Hollywood Squares, and she runs a small empire with her name on it. The little girl who fell the furthest got up the most times, and she did it with a generosity that suggests she remembers exactly how dark it got. Drew Barrymore is the proof of the whole thesis. The childhood does not have to be the end of the story. Sometimes it is just the brutal first chapter of a very long and very good book. Lindsay Lohan. For a while, she was the most talented young actress of her generation. Full stop. The Parent Trap, where she played twins so convincingly that a generation of kids did not realize it was one girl. Freaky Friday. Mean Girls, a film so quotable it has become a permanent part of the language. Lindsay Lohan had everything, the looks and the timing, and a real, serious gift. And then came one of the most relentlessly documented young celebrity unravelings of the modern era, the era when the gossip blogs and the paparazzi had become a 24-hour machine pointed directly at young women, and she became its biggest target. The legal troubles, the lost years, the public pile-on. It was ugly, and a lot of the ugliness belonged to the people watching, not to her. But the story did not end there, and in 2025 it turned decisively into something better. Lindsay Lohan has staged a genuine comeback. She returned to the role that helped make her, in Freakier Friday, the sequel that reunited her with Jamie Lee Curtis, and she did it as a poised, married, settled adult, a mother, a businesswoman with fashion lines and hospitality ventures, an industry award honoree. Where is she now? Back, on purpose, on her own terms, and stable in a way the tabloids never thought she would be. Her comeback matters more than most because of how publicly she was written off. She was the punchline of an entire decade, and she outlasted the people laughing. There is justice in that. There is real justice in that. Part 7. The Ones Who Built Something New. Alfonso Ribeiro. He will be doing the dance at his own funeral, and he knows it, and he has made his peace with it. Alfonso Ribeiro was Carlton Banks on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the prim, pop-loving, Tom Jones dancing cousin, and the Carlton dance is now permanent cultural property, a thing that will outlive all of us. Like a lot of the people in this book, he spent years a little boxed in by a character that big. Unlike a lot of them, he found the perfect escape hatch. He stopped chasing acting roles and became a host, and it turned out he was born for it. Where is he now? He has hosted America's Funniest Home Videos since 2015, one of the steadiest gigs in all of television, and he co-hosts Dancing with the Stars, a show he himself once won. He is a married father of several children, financially secure, beloved, and entirely comfortable in his own skin. Alfonso Ribeiro figured out the thing that took some of his peers decades to learn, if they learned it at all. He stopped resenting the character that made him and started building on top of it. The dance is not a cage. The dance is the foundation. He has been dancing all the way to a long, happy, stable career, and good for him for hearing the music. Tatiana Ali. She grew up in front of us as Ashley Banks, the youngest Banks daughter on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the sweet kid sister who became a young woman over the run of the show, and for a while she chased a pop music career off the back of that fame. But the most impressive thing about Tatiana Ali is what she did when the show ended and the spotlight moved on. She went to Harvard. She earned a degree from one of the finest universities on earth. The child star who decided the most rebellious thing she could do was get seriously rigorously educated. Where is she now? She built a life of substance. She is a mother of two, a political and social activist who has campaigned and organized in earnest, a businesswoman who recently launched a company making handmade baby goods with proceeds going to support Black birth workers, and an author of children's books. She still acts when she wants to, but acting is no longer the center of gravity of her life. Her own mind is. Tatiana Ali took the visibility a childhood on television gave her and spent it on causes and on learning and on building things that will outlast any sitcom. The sweet kid sister grew into one of the most quietly accomplished people in this entire book, Anna Chlumsky. She broke a million young hearts as Vada in My Girl, the tomboy whose best friend dies, in a scene that traumatized a generation in the gentlest possible way. Anna Chlumsky was a major child star, and then she did something almost unheard of. She quit completely. Not a hiatus, not a step back. She left acting in her teens, went to the University of Chicago, got a real degree, and worked an ordinary office job, fully prepared to be done with show business forever. And then, as an adult, entirely on her own initiative, she came back and built a far better grown-up career than her child career ever was. Where is she now? An acclaimed, Emmy-nominated actress, best known for years of brilliant comic work as the perpetually exasperated Amy on Veep, and steadily employed since in prestige television and on the stage. Anna Chlumsky is the rare case who lived a completely normal young adulthood, and then chose this life as a clear-eyed adult who knew exactly what she was signing up for the second time. The girl from My Girl grew up, went away, and came back stronger, on purpose. It is one of the healthiest arcs a person can have in this business, and she walked it without drama, which is why you may not have even realized it happened. Edward Furlong. Not every road in this book bends back toward the light as cleanly, and honesty requires we say so. Edward Furlong was the kid in Terminator 2, John Connor, the future savior of humanity, discovered at 12 and thrown into one of the biggest movies ever made. He was electric in it, a natural, and the years after were genuinely hard, marked by long and public struggles with addiction and the legal troubles that so often travel with it. We are not going to walk you through the low points. They are documented, and dwelling on them would be the opposite of the spirit of this book. What we will tell you is the part worth holding on to. He is still here, and he has spoken publicly about fighting for his sobriety, marking years of it, doing the daily, unglamorous, enormously difficult work of recovery, which does not make headlines the way the falling apart did. Where is he now? Living a quieter life, still acting here and there, and by his own public accounting trying, one day at a time, to stay well. His is not a triumphant comeback story, and we will not dress it up as one. It is something more modest, and in its way, more moving. It is a man who got handed enormous fame as a child, paid a steep price for it, and is still in the ring. Sometimes still being in the ring is the whole victory. We are pulling for him. In Memoriam, the ones we lost. We cannot close an honest accounting of the children who grew up on our screens without sitting, for a moment, with the ones who are no longer here. This is the hardest part of the book, and we will move through it gently, because these were real people, and they have real families, and grief does not belong to the audience. Gary Coleman was, for a stretch, the biggest child star in America. As Arnold Jackson on Different Strokes is what you talking about. Willis became one of the most repeated phrases of its decade. But his story is a hard one. marked by serious health problems from childhood, by painful disputes over the money he earned as a boy, and by the difficulty of being an adult the world refused to let grow up. He died in 2010, at just 42. He deserved more gentleness in his life than he got, and the kindest thing we can do now is remember the joy he gave and grant him the dignity that was too often denied him. Corey Haim was the heartthrob of the 1980s, luminous in The Lost Boys, and Licensed to Drive, one half, with Corey Feldman, of the most famous teen duo of the era. Behind the posters, he was a boy exposed to harm and to addiction far too young, in an industry that protected almost no one. He spent his short adult life fighting that addiction in public, and he died in 2010 at 38. In recent years, the people who loved him and survived alongside him have spoken hard truths about what was done to children in that era, and those truths matter. The least we owe Corey Haim is to see him as the boy he was, and not the cautionary tale he got turned into. And Cameron Boyce, the youngest loss in this book, and in some ways the one that stings the most, because he did everything right. A genuinely gifted young Disney star from Jessie and the Descendants films. By every account, a kind, grounded, generous young man, devoted to charity work far beyond his years. He died in his sleep in 2019, at only 20, from a seizure, an effect of the epilepsy he lived with. His family turned their unimaginable grief into a foundation in his name, funding epilepsy research and the causes he cared about. He is the reminder that the screen freezes them young, but life does not promise any of them old age. And one more, the most recent, still tender as we speak. Malcolm Jamal Warner was Theo Huxtable on The Cosby Show, the only son in the most watched family in America. A kid who grew up in front of the whole country across 8 seasons and then did the rarest thing of all. He grew into a thoughtful, working, widely respected adult, an actor, a director, a Grammy-winning poet and musician, a man who carried himself with a quiet grace his entire life. He died in July of 2025, at just 54, in an accidental drowning while on vacation with his family. His loss landed hard precisely because he had done everything right, because he was one of the success stories, proof that a child star could become a whole and dignified adult. We grieve him alongside the others. He showed a generation what growing up well could look like, and we will not forget it. And Aaron Carter, who was famous before he was 10, a pint-sized pop star, opening for the Backstreet Boys, his older brother already a global idol, the whole machinery of fame bearing down on a little boy who never really got a childhood to begin with. His life was hard and public and full of the addiction and instability that this industry has handed to too many of its youngest. He died in 2022, at just 34. He was a kid who was put to work entertaining the world before he had any idea who he was, and he spent the rest of his short life trying to find out. We remember the boy, and we are gentle with the man. And Lee Thompson Young, who many of you grew up watching as the title hero of the Disney Channel show, the famous Jet Jackson, a poised, talented young man who carried his own series and then built a working adult career on respected dramas. Behind the steady professional, he was quietly fighting a battle with his mental health that almost no one around him fully saw, and he died in 2013, at just 29. His passing was a hard lesson for an entire industry about the invisible weight that some of these capable, high-functioning young people carry, and about how easy it is to miss. We remember his talent and his kindness, and we say his name as a reminder to check on the people who always seem fine. We remember them all with love, and we hold their families in the quiet. Part 8. The Full House Kids. There has never been a better laboratory for this question than one single television house in San Francisco. Full House put a whole litter of child actors on screen at once, and they have lived out almost every possible version of the after-fame life, which is why they get a part to themselves. Jodie Sweetin played Stephanie Tanner, the sassy middle daughter. How rude, and her road after the show was one of the hardest in this book, a long and very public battle with addiction that began frighteningly young. But she did the work, and she did not hide it, and her honesty has become its own kind of public service. Where is she now? Sober for years, an author who wrote candidly about her recovery, an advocate who speaks openly to help others, a mother, a podcast host, and a returning cast member on Fuller House. The sassy middle kid grew into one of the most quietly courageous people from that whole era because she turned her hardest chapter into a hand extended to the next person going through it. The Olsen twins, Mary-Kate and Ashley, were that show's secret weapon, two babies sharing one role as little Michelle, and they parlayed it into the most successful child star business empire in history, a tween media juggernaut of movies and merchandise. And then, as adults, they walked away from acting almost entirely and did the most unexpected thing of all. They became serious, respected, high-fashion designers. Where are they now? Running the Row, one of the most acclaimed luxury fashion labels in the world, winning industry design awards, living intensely private lives far from the cameras that raised them. The most famous toddlers in America grew up to decide that fame was the thing they wanted least, and they had earned enough of it to buy themselves all the way out. They build clothes now, beautifully, where no one is watching. That was the goal the whole time. Candace Cameron Bure played D.J., the eldest Tanner daughter, and her afterlife is a study in choosing a lane and committing to it completely. Where is she now? She built a durable second career as the queen of wholesome television movies, became a prominent voice in faith-based and family entertainment, an author, a producer, and a public figure who knows exactly who her audience is and serves them without apology. Whatever you make of her particular path, it is undeniably a stable, self-directed adult life built deliberately on the foundation the show gave her. She is still here, still working, still herself. In this book, that counts for a great deal. Part 9. The Geniuses and the Chameleons. Danica McKellar. She was Winnie Cooper on The Wonder Years, the girl next door, the first crush of an entire generation of boys, the face at the center of the most tender coming-of-age show of its time. And then she went and quietly became one of the most surprising people in this entire book. Danica McKellar is a mathematician, a real one. She studied math at UCLA, graduated summa cum laude, and co-authored an actual published mathematical theorem that bears her name. Let that sit for a second. The dream girl from the after-school show is a published mathematics researcher. Where is she now? She has written a whole shelf of best-selling books aimed at getting girls excited about math, fighting the very stereotype that a pretty girl on television cannot also be brilliant. She acts, too, a regular fixture in the world of cozy holiday movies, and she is a wife and mother. Danica McKellar is the living rebuttal to everything shallow that fame assumes about a person. The whole world looked at Winnie Cooper and saw a crush. She looked at herself and saw a scientist, and then she went and proved it with a theorem in a peer-reviewed journal. There may be no better story in here about refusing to be only the thing the screen made you. Christina Ricci. She was the most interesting child star of her generation, and she knew it, and she used it. As Wednesday Addams in the Addams Family films, a deadpan little girl with a genius for menace, Christina Ricci was unlike any other kid in Hollywood, and she spent her teens deliberately choosing dark, strange, grown-up independent films when her peers were chasing teen comedies. She has spoken, as an adult, with startling frankness about a difficult childhood and about how the film industry, for all its dangers, was in some ways a refuge for her, the rescue rather than the wound. That is a complicated truth, and she tells it without flinching. Where is she now? Working at the height of her powers, decades in, which is the rarest thing of all for a former child star. A whole new generation discovered her through her acclaimed role in the thriller series Yellow Jackets, and she returned to the world that made her with a part in the Wednesday series, the grown woman orbiting the character she originated as a child. She continues to produce and to choose fearless, peculiar, excellent work. Christina Ricci never tried to outrun the strange little girl she was. She grew her into a strange and formidable woman, and she has been quietly one of the best actors of her entire generation, the whole way through. The chameleon kept every color. Part 10. The Pop Machine Graduates. The most recent wave of child stars came up through a particular machine, the Disney and pop music pipeline of the late 2000s, where a kid could be an actor and a singer and a brand all at once before they were old enough to drive. It chewed up plenty of them, but a few came through it and became some of the most powerful people in entertainment, and their stories are still being written, which makes them the most interesting of all. Selena Gomez started as a little girl on Barney and Friends, became the lead of Wizards of Waverly Place, and was, for a stretch, defined mostly by her pop career and by a level of tabloid attention no young person should have to carry. And then she grew, in public, into something far larger and far steadier. Where is she now? One of the most successful women in the industry, full stop. She stars in Only Murders in the Building, earned acclaim for serious film work, and built rare beauty into a beauty empire that she has tied, deliberately and movingly, to mental health advocacy, having been honest about her own struggles with her health. She is a producer, a mogul, and as of recently a newlywed. The kid from the Wizard show grew up to be one of the most influential people in the business, and she did it while telling the truth about how hard it was. That combination is rare. So is she. Demi Lovato came up alongside her, on the same shows and the same stages, and walked a much harder road, one of the most public battles with addiction and mental health of the entire social media era. We will not detail the lowest points, because she already has, with more courage than any narrator could bring to it, in her own documentaries and her own songs. And here is the thing that makes her belong in this book more than almost anyone. In 2024, she stepped behind the camera and directed a documentary called Child Star about this exact subject, the very phenomenon you are listening to an episode about, made by someone who lived it from the inside. Where is she now? Still making music, married as of 2025, in recovery and an advocate for others in it, and now a storyteller examining the machine that made her. She turned her own hardest experience into a tool for understanding. That is about the best thing a survivor can do with a survival. Zendaya is the proof of what the machine can produce when, against considerable odds, it does not break the kid. She started on the Disney Channel, on Shake It Up, a song and dance teen star like dozens before her, and she became, simply, one of the biggest and most respected stars on the planet. Where is she now? At the absolute top. An Emmy winner for Euphoria, the lead of the Dune films, a fixture of the Spider-Man movies, a fashion icon, a producer building her own projects, regarded across the industry as one of the most talented and grounded people of her generation. She is the rare child star whose adult fame dwarfs the childhood one, who used the Disney launch pad exactly as a launch pad and never looked back. If the rest of this book is about surviving childhood fame, Zendaya is the chapter about transcending it. They do not all break. Some of them fly. Part 11. The Movie Kids Who Never Left. Dakota Fanning was the most in-demand child actress of the 2000s, a tiny powerhouse who held her own opposite Denzel Washington and Tom Cruise before she was 10. With a poise that frankly unnerved the adults around her. The fear, with a kid that good that young, is always the same. There is nowhere to go but down. She declined to go down. Where is she now? A respected working adult actress with a body of grown-up work that has nothing to prove, recently earning major award nominations for the series Ripley and lining up lead roles in prestige television. She did not flame out. She did not take a breakdown detour. She simply grew from a great child actor into a great adult one, which sounds easy and is almost impossible. The little girl who outacted movie stars grew into one, on a slow, steady climb that never needed a comeback because it never went away. Henry Thomas will always, to most of the world, be one thing. He is Elliot. He is the boy with the flashlight and the bicycle and the alien in the closet, the heart of E.T., one of the most beloved films ever made, and he gave a performance at 10 years old so pure that people still cry recalling it. That is a heavy thing to carry, to peak in the public memory at 10. But Henry Thomas never stopped working. And in recent years, he has done something delicious with the back half of his career. He has become a horror favorite, a member of the unofficial repertory company of the director Mike Flanagan, turning up in The Haunting of Hill House, Midnight Mass, and the rest, the gentle boy from E.T. grown into a man who is very good at quiet dread. Where is he now? A steadily working character actor decades in, respected by the people who hire him, no longer asking anyone to forget Elliot, just adding chapters of his own. The boy who said goodbye to the alien grew up and kept the lights on for 40 years and counting. Elijah Wood was a prolific child actor through the 1990s, in everything, the reliable kid in a dozen films, and then, right at the threshold of adulthood, he was cast as Frodo in The Lord of the Rings and became part of one of the most monumental film achievements of all time. That could have been a trap, the role too big to escape. Instead, he treated it as freedom. Where is he now? He went weird, on purpose and brilliantly. He chose strange independent films, took character roles, leaned into horror and comedy, and most impressively, started a production company, Spectre Vision, that has made a string of acclaimed, daring genre films, putting his Hobbit money to work backing the kind of art he loves. He is a producer, a cult film hero, a music lover with his own label, and one of the most respected weirdos in the business. The child actor became Frodo, and then used Frodo to fund exactly the odd, beautiful career he wanted. That is the dream. That is the whole dream. Part 12. The comebacks that took decades. Some second acts arrive quickly. Some take 40 years. And the longest, slowest, most improbable comeback in the history of child stardom belongs to a man who waited most of his life for the world to remember what it had. Ke Huy Quan was the kid in two of the defining films of the 1980s. He was Short Round in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, holding his own opposite Harrison Ford at 12. He was Data in The Goonies, the inventor kid with the gadgets, beloved by every child who saw it. And then he grew up, and the phone simply stopped ringing because Hollywood in that era had almost no roles for an Asian American actor, child or adult. So he did the practical thing. He went behind the camera, became a stunt coordinator and an assistant director, and quietly gave up on acting for the better part of 2 decades. He had been one of the most famous kids in the world, and then he spent 20 years being told there was no place for him. And then, in his 50s, lightning. He was cast in a strange, wild, independent film called Everything Everywhere All at Once. And he was so extraordinary in it, so full of a tenderness that had been waiting 40 years for somewhere to go, that in 2023 he stood on the stage at the Academy Awards and wept and held the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, and the whole world wept with him. Where is he now? A working, beloved, in-demand movie star at last, leading films, headlining series, celebrated everywhere he goes, including a handprint ceremony at the Chinese Theater in 2025, where his old Goonies castmates came to stand beside him. His is the most hopeful story in this entire book, and the hardest one. He is the proof that the door is never permanently closed, that the kid you were is not gone just because the world looked away for a while. Sometimes it takes 40 years. Ke Huy Quan waited, and he kept his heart soft the whole time. And then he walked through the door, and he has not stopped smiling since. Neither have the rest of us. Part 13, The Reinventors and the Last of the 80s. Miley Cyrus was Hannah Montana, the biggest child star Disney ever produced, a girl living a double life on screen, secretly a pop star, which turned out to be the least interesting double life she would lead, because the real story was what came after, when she set about loudly and deliberately and on her own terms, demolishing the wholesome image the machine had built and replacing it with a self she actually chose. It was messy, and it was public, and a lot of people clutched their pearls. She did not care. Where is she now? One of the most respected musicians of her generation, a genuine vocal powerhouse who shed the costume and became an artist, scoring one of the biggest songs of the decade in Flowers, and finally winning the industry recognition that the Hannah Montana of it all had long obscured. Miley Cyrus is what it looks like when a manufactured child star seizes the controls and insists, against enormous resistance, on becoming a real and complicated adult. She did the loud version of growing up, and she came out the other side an artist, exactly as she always said she would. Corey Feldman was, with Corey Haim, the other half of the most famous teen pairing of the 1980s, and a star in his own right long before that, in Gremlins and The Goonies, and Stand By Me and The Lost Boys, an astonishing run of beloved films for one kid. His road since has been turbulent and public, but the most important thing he has done as an adult is become a relentless advocate, refusing to stay quiet about the harm done to child actors in his era, including to his late best friend. Where is he now? Still making music and appearances, still here, and still using his voice, sometimes to the discomfort of powerful people, to insist that what happened to children in that industry be acknowledged. He reunited with his Goonies family in 2025 to celebrate Ke Huy Quan. Whatever the tabloids made of him, Corey Feldman is a survivor who decided his survival should mean something for the kids who came after. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, a a great deal. Sean Astin was Mikey, the heart and the leader of the Goonies, the asthmatic kid with the speech that made a generation believe in itself. This is our time. He had a famous mother, Patty Duke, herself a child star, so he understood the machine from birth, and his afterlife is one of the steadiest and happiest in this book. Where is he now? He never stopped working, and he picked up a second iconic role as an adult, as Samwise Gamgee in The Lord of the Rings, meaning this one man anchored the emotional center of two of the most beloved films of two different generations. He is a working actor, a director, an author, a devoted family man, a podcaster, and by every public account, one of the genuinely kindest people in the industry. Mikey grew up to be Sam, the loyal one, the one who carries his friend up the mountain, and you get the sense he has been exactly that, off-screen, for everyone in his life. Some of these kids turned out just fine. Sean Astin turned out wonderful. Ben Savage was Corey Matthews on Boy Meets World, the every kid whose ordinary adolescence a generation lived through every Friday night. He carried that into adulthood gracefully, even reprising the role as a father himself in the sequel series Girl Meets World, the boy who met the world grown into the dad, explaining it. And then he did something none of his peers did. He tried to leave acting for public service entirely, mounting a real campaign for the United States Congress. He did not win, but the attempt tells you something about where his head went after the cameras, toward a desire to do something solid and civic, with a life that started in front of an audience. Where is he now? Out of the spotlight, having taken his swing at a different kind of life. Not every reinvention succeeds, but the reaching for one, the refusal to simply coast on the old fame, is its own kind of growing up. And Ben Savage reached Part 14. The Ones Who Built a Whole Life. Keshia Knight Pulliam was Rudy Huxtable, the baby of the Cosby family, and there has perhaps never been a more universally adored small child on American television. She was the cute one, the one whose every line got a laugh just by being delivered, and the trap for a child like that is enormous, because cute does not survive adolescence, and the audience tends not to forgive a kid for growing up. She survived it with her head completely on straight. Where is she now? A working actress for decades, a long-running fixture in Tyler Perry's television world, and more impressively, a serious entrepreneur and philanthropist. She co-founded a venture capital fund supporting women of color, runs a nonprofit empowering young girls, has a product line, and is a wife and mother. The baby of the Huxtables grew up into a businesswoman and a builder of things for other people's daughters. Rudy turned out to be one of the most capable adults in this entire book, and she did it without a single tabloid chapter. That is its own quiet triumph. Neil Patrick Harris was Doogie Howser, a teenage doctor, one of the most specific and inescapable child star boxes anyone has ever been put in. To a whole generation he was, and threatened to remain forever, the boy genius in the white coat. And then he engineered one of the most complete and joyful reinventions in the history of the form. Where is he now? An entertainment institution. He spent years as the scene-stealing Barney on How I Met Your Mother, became one of the great live hosts of his era at the Tonys and the Oscars and the Emmys, a Broadway star with real theatrical chops, a best-selling author, an enthusiastic magician, and, in his personal life, an out and married father of twins who has been, for many people, a quiet example of a happy life lived openly. Doogie Howser did not trap him. He used it as a springboard, and then he simply out-talented the box until it disappeared. Neil Patrick Harris, is what it looks like when a former child star decides to be great at absolutely everything, and more or less pulls it off. Wil Wheaton has a more complicated and more honest relationship with his own child stardom than almost anyone in this book, and that honesty is exactly his second act. He was a star at 12 in Stand By Me, then spent his teen years as Wesley Crusher on Star Trek The Next Generation, beamed into living rooms every week, and he has been remarkably candid as an adult about how much of that experience was difficult, how complicated it is to have your adolescence be public property. Where is he now? He left acting as a primary career and reinvented himself as a writer, a blogger. Before blogging had a name, a podcaster, a host of nerd culture programming, and a beloved elder of the geek community. Most movingly, he has become a powerful public advocate for mental health, writing and speaking with deep candor about depression and anxiety, and his own hard childhood, helping enormous numbers of people feel less alone. The kid who was uneasy with fame grew into a man who used the platform it left him to tell the truth and to help. He turned ambivalence into service. That is a wise and generous way to spend a complicated start. Kirk Cameron was Mike Seaver on Growing Pains, a genuine teen idol, the poster on the wall, one of the biggest young heartthrobs of the late 1980s. And then he experienced a profound religious conversion, and it reorganized his entire life and career around his faith, a path that has at times put him at odds with Hollywood and made him a polarizing public figure. We are not here to debate any of that. We are here to tell you where the road went. Where is he now? He left mainstream acting almost entirely to become a full-time evangelist, a maker of faith-based films and family programming, an author, a touring speaker, and recently the host of a children's series built around his religious values, having relocated his family to Tennessee. Whatever you make of his beliefs, his is undeniably a complete, self-directed, deeply committed adult life, built with total conviction on a foundation entirely different from the one fame handed him. The heartthrob became a preacher, on purpose, and never looked back. In a book about people choosing who to become after childhood fame, that is, on its own terms, exactly what he did. Part 15, The Last of the Roll Call. Before we close, a handful more, because a book like this could go on forever, and every single name is somebody a listener out there is still wondering about. Danielle Fishel was Topanga on Boy Meets World, half of one of the most beloved young couples in sitcom history, the girl a generation of boys measured every real girlfriend against. Where is she now? She came back to play the grown Topanga in Girl Meets World, became a television director behind the camera, and now co-hosts the rewatch podcast Pod Meets World with her old castmates, turning the show that made her into a warm second career, talking about it with the people who lived it. She has also been openly, bravely public about a recent early-stage breast cancer diagnosis, caught early, treated, and shared in order to remind other women to get screened. The girl everyone wanted to grow up and marry grew up into a director, a podcaster, a mother, and a health advocate. Topanga is doing just fine and using her platform to look out for the rest of us. Devon Sawa was the heartthrob of the late 1990s, the dreamy face in Casper and Now and Then and Final Destination, the poster boy who seemed destined for either superstardom or the usual vanishing act. He chose a third path. He disappeared from the teen idol circuit and then came roaring back as an adult in a completely different lane, as a respected genre and horror actor, a fan favorite in exactly the kind of dark, fun projects his teen image never hinted at. Where is he now? working steadily and visibly in horror and television, beloved by a fan base that grew up with him and followed him into the spookier, stranger second half of his career. He let the heartthrob go and became something more durable, a working character actor with a cult following. Not every teen idol pulls that off. He did. Tia and Tamara Mowry were sister, the identical twins separated at birth and reunited, and they were, for the 1990s, one of the defining young acts on television. Two girls building a joint empire of sitcom and teen movie fame. As adults, they have moved in their own directions, both continuing to work in television and to build lifestyle and business brands, navigating very public adult lives, including the ordinary grown-up passages of marriage, and for one of them, a publicly handled divorce, the kind of real-life chapter the rest of us get to go through without a press release. Where are they now? Still working, still building. Two women who turned to childhood as a novelty act. Look, twins, into durable individual careers and brands of their own. They grew, as twins eventually must, into two distinct adults, and they did it in full view, with grace. Jonathan Lipnicki said one of the most quoted lines any child ever delivered. The human head weighs 8 pounds. He was the impossibly cute little boy in Jerry Maguire and Stuart Little, the glasses, the gap, the face built for a movie poster. And the trap for a kid that's specifically adorable is brutal, because adorable has the shortest shelf life of anything in Hollywood. He handled the expiration of cute by reinventing his body and his discipline entirely. Where is he now? He grew up into a dedicated martial artist, a serious practitioner of jiu-jitsu, and a working actor in independent film, a grown man who deliberately rebuilt himself, as far from the cute kid image as a person can get. The little boy with the 8-pound head grew up and learned to fight, literally. And there is something both funny and admirable about a former movie moppet choosing the mat as his way of becoming a man on his own terms. Abigail Breslin was nominated for an Academy Award at 10 years old for Little Miss Sunshine, the deadpan little girl in the glasses doing the talent show dance that breaks your heart and makes you cheer at the same time. That is an almost impossible bar to clear so young. And she did the steady, unglamorous thing of just keeping at it. Where is she now? A working adult actress with a long resume in film and television, a singer, an author, a married mother who made the transition from celebrated child performer to ordinary working professional without a tabloid detour. She is the quiet, healthy version of this story, the one where a kid earns an Oscar nomination, grows up, keeps working, and builds a normal grown-up life. Those endings do not make headlines. They are, in fact, the best ones. Part 16. The cool one. Lisa Bonet. Be honest. If you were a teenager in the late 1980s, you had a thing for Lisa Bonet, and so did everyone you knew, and you have probably never fully gotten over it. She was Denise Huxtable on The Cosby Show, the second daughter, and she was not like the other kids on television, not like the other kids anywhere. While the rest of the cast played it broad and bright, Denise was cool in a way that could not be taught or faked, dreamy and mysterious and a little bit untouchable, dressed in thrift store layers nobody else could pull off, looking at the world from somewhere just slightly to the left of it. She got her own spin-off, A Different World, and for a generation of kids, she was the first famous person who made being an artsy, alternative, march-to-your-own drummer weirdo look not just acceptable, but enviable. A lot of us became who we are partly because Lisa Bonet showed us, at exactly the right age, that you were allowed to be strange and still be the most magnetic person in the room. And then she did the most on-brand thing imaginable. She walked away from the spotlight and went and lived, fully, privately, on her own terms, a free spirit who genuinely meant it. She married the rock star Lenny Kravitz Young, and their daughter, Zoe Kravitz, grew up to be a major star in her own right, which means a whole new generation now discovers Lisa Bonet backward as the impossibly cool mother of the impossibly cool daughter. Later, she married the actor Jason Momoa in one of the great How Did That Happen love stories, the Game of Thrones giant who had reportedly carried a torch for the dreamy Cosby Show girl since he was a teenager, exactly like the rest of us. They were, for years, the most beautiful and most envied couple in Hollywood, and then, quietly and with characteristic dignity, they ended it, finalizing their divorce in 2024 and sharing custody of their 2 children with grace. Where is she now? Exactly where you would hope. Out of the glare, living an intentional and private life, an icon precisely because she never chased being one. Lisa Bonet is the rare child and teen star who seemed to understand from the very beginning that fame was a thing that happened to her and not a thing she was, and she has spent her adult life protecting the difference. The coolest girl on television grew up to be the coolest woman almost nobody can find, and that, if you knew her the way we all thought we did, is the only ending that was ever going to fit. She was always going to slip quietly out the side door and leave us wondering. We are still wondering. That is the whole magic of her. Part 17, The Disney Channel Machine. We come, near the end, to the most recent factory, the Disney Channel of the 2000s and 2010s, the place that minted the most stars in the shortest time of any operation in the history of child fame. If you have kids, or if you were one in those years, these are the faces from the living room, and the question of where they went is, for a lot of families, a very current one. Bridget Mendler is the one that will stop you cold, and we have saved her for here on purpose, because her story is the single most improbable in this entire book. She was Teddy on Good Luck Charlie, a wholesome, beloved Disney Channel lead, a pop singer with the bubblegum hits to match, exactly the kind of manufactured teen star the machine produces by the dozen and discards by the dozen. You would have bet money on the usual arc. You would have lost everything. Because Bridget Mendler went and got an education that makes your head spin, a degree from Harvard, a doctorate from MIT, genuine credentials in the hardest subjects there are. And then she did the thing nobody saw coming. She founded a space company. Where is she now? She is the chief executive of a satellite technology startup that is mass-producing the ground stations that connect to spacecraft in orbit. A company that has raised well over $100 million, putting the former Disney pop star in rooms with aerospace engineers and venture capitalists and the actual future of the space economy. She has talked about how being rejected hundreds of times as a young actress was the perfect training for the brutal work of building a company. The teen idol from the Disney sitcom is now, with no exaggeration whatsoever, a space executive. If you ever needed proof that the kid on the screen contains multitudes the screen could never show you, her name is Bridget Mendler, and she is, at this moment, helping to wire the sky. Dove Cameron was a Disney double act all by herself, playing identical twins on Liv and Maddie, and a star of the Descendants movies that an entire younger generation grew up on the way an older one grew up on The Lion King. And like so many of the kids in this book, the fascinating part is what happened when she set out to become an adult artist on her own terms. Where is she now? She shed the Disney sparkle deliberately and reinvented herself as a serious pop musician with a darker, more grown-up sound, scoring real success on the charts and stepping fully out of the teen idol mold she was cast in. She has been thoughtful and open in interviews about her complicated relationship with fame and identity, the work of figuring out who you are when you spent your formative years being told who to be. She is engaged, making the music she wants to make, and visibly happier as the artist she chose than as the brand she was assigned. The Disney twin grew up and became one whole, specific person, which after a childhood spent literally playing two people at once feels like exactly the right kind of victory. Debbie Ryan was Jessie, the Disney Channel nanny show that ran in 1,000 living rooms, and before that, The Sweet Life on Deck, a reliable, sunny presence for a whole cohort of kids. The grown-up version of her is quietly one of the most interesting in the new generation. Where is she now? She broke fully out of the Disney mold with a genuinely acclaimed, against-type dramatic performance in the Netflix series Insatiable, moved into directing and producing, married Josh Dunn, the drummer of the enormous band 21 Pilots, and in late 2025, the two of them welcomed their first child. She has built exactly the kind of life that the Disney machine rarely leaves room for, an artistically serious, personally grounded adulthood on her own clock. The sunny nanny grew up into a director and a mother and a wife in a rock and roll family, and she did it without ever becoming a cautionary tale, another one who came through the factory hole. Bella Thorne came up on Shake It Up alongside Zendaya, two Disney girls at the same starting line, and where Zendaya ascended to the A-list, Bella Thorne chose a wilder, louder, more provocative road, determined to detonate the wholesome Disney image as completely and publicly as possible. It made her a lightning rod, and she has never seemed to mind that one bit. Where is she now? An adult actress, a prolific director and entrepreneur, a businesswoman who has built ventures in places the Disney Channel would faint to hear, named, engaged, and running her own creative empire entirely on her own terms. Whatever you make of her particular choices, Bella Thorne is nobody's puppet, and never was. A former child star who looked at the brand she was handed and decided to set it on fire and build something stranger in the ashes. In a book full of people fighting to be more than the kid on the screen, she may have fought the loudest, and she is still standing, still working, still doing exactly as she pleases. That counts. Part 18. The Kids Who Made Us Rap. Child stardom was never only a Hollywood thing. Some of the kids we grew up with did not act on a sitcom or sing a Disney song. They grabbed a microphone, and for a few glorious years they were the coolest children on the planet, and a whole generation tried badly to copy them in the bedroom mirror. If you were a kid in 1992, you wore your clothes backwards, and you know exactly why. Criss Cross were two 13-year-old boys from Atlanta, Chris Kelly and Chris Smith, Mac Daddy and Daddy Mac, discovered in a shopping mall by a young producer named Jermaine Dupri, and their song Jump was not a hit. It was a national event, the #1 song in the country for weeks, an inescapable phenomenon that turned a fashion mistake into a movement. Every kid in America flipped their jeans around. Every kid. They were the biggest thing in music, and they could not yet drive. And here is where their story turns from nostalgia to something tender, because we have to tell you the hard part. Chris Kelly, Mac Daddy, the one whose voice you can still hear in your head right now if you let it, died in 2013 at just 34. He was a grown man by then, but to all of us he is frozen forever as that grinning 13-year-old in the backwards cross colors, telling us to jump. His friend and partner, Chris Smith, has carried the legacy and the loss since, and we remember the duo with real affection. Two kids who gave an entire generation a sound and a silly, joyful uniform, and one of whom we lost far too soon. When you flip an old photo and see yourself in those backwards jeans, say his name. Bo Wow was Lil Bo Wow, a tiny boy with an enormous talent, discovered as a 6-year-old by Snoop Dogg, taken under the wing of Jermaine Dupri, and turned into the biggest kid rapper of his era, a platinum-selling pre-teen who then did the thing kid rappers almost never pull off and built a whole second life as an adult. Where is he now? He grew up, dropped the Lil, became a respected actor in film and on television, hosted the legendary music video show 106 and Park for years, becoming one of the defining faces of Black entertainment television for a generation, and has stayed a working, touring, visible entertainer ever since, recently back on the road on big nostalgia tours that pack arenas with the kids, now grown, who memorized his rhymes. The little boy Snoop found grew into a genuine multi-hyphenate, an actor and host and rapper who turned a child prodigy moment into a durable 30-year career. He is one of the great success stories of kid stardom in any genre, and he did it in the hardest, most unforgiving industry of all. And Lil Romeo, now simply Romeo Miller, was the kid rapper Prince, the son of the mogul Master P, who built an entire children's entertainment brand around his talented boy. The cartoon, the clothing, the chart-topping records aimed squarely at kids. Where is he now? He became one of the most diversified adults in this entire book. He grew up to be an actor, a college basketball player, a serious entrepreneur, an investor with his own companies, a philanthropist, and a public advocate, having been open about living with type 1 diabetes. He took the platform his father built for him as a child and turned it into a launching pad for a genuinely independent adult life of business and creativity. The kid rapper Prince grew into a young mogul in his own right, on his own terms, stepping out of his famous father's shadow to build something with his own name on it. Not bad for the little boy who once rapped about his sneakers. Not bad at all. Part 19. The group that survived it together. New Edition is the hopeful answer to the Jackson 5's cautionary tale. The group that took the kids singing as a family act template and eventually, somehow, survived it together. 5 boys from the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston, barely teenagers in the early 1980s, Ralph Tresvant, Bobby Brown, Ricky Bell, Michael Bivins, and Ronnie DeVoe, later joined by Johnny Gill. They were the blueprint for every boy band that followed, the direct ancestors of everyone from New Kids to the Backstreet Boys. And their after story is one of the most remarkable in music, because almost all of them are not only still alive, but still working together. Bobby Brown became one of the biggest solo stars of his era, and then walked one of the most public and painful roads in this entire book, through addiction, through his marriage to Whitney Houston, through losses no parent should endure, and he has come out the other side sober and speaking openly to help others. Michael Bivins turned his child stardom into a second empire, forming Belle Biv DeVoe with 2 of his bandmates and becoming a major talent executive who discovered and launched other huge acts. Ralph Tresvant and Ronnie DeVoe and Ricky Bell and Johnny Gill have all kept careers alive across 40 years. Where are they now? Astonishingly, on stage together, regularly, a group of men in their 50s who became famous as children and who have somehow held their brotherhood together through every kind of trouble that fame can bring, even getting their own celebrated biographical film. They are the proof, at the very end of this book, of the best thing that can happen. Sometimes the kids who grew up famous together get to grow old famous together too, still harmonizing, still standing, still here. Part 20. The Ones Who Grew into Icons. Keke Palmer has been famous for so long and started so young that it is easy to forget she is still, by the calendar, a young woman. She was 11 when she carried the film Akilah and the Bee on her tiny shoulders, a spelling bee drama that asked a child to anchor an entire movie, and she did it with a poise that made the whole industry sit up. And from there she simply never stopped, and never broke, and never had the cautionary chapter. Where is she now? One of the most versatile entertainers alive. She has been a Broadway Cinderella, the first Black woman to host her own late-night talk show, the host of a hit game show, a scene-stealing movie star in films like the horror hit Nope, an Emmy winner, a singer, a mother, a businesswoman, and one of the funniest and most quotable people on the entire internet. Keke Palmer is what happens when a child star turns out to have been, the whole time, a once-in-a-generation talent who was simply waiting for the rest of her to catch up to the gift. She grew up in front of us, completely, from a serious little girl with a spelling bee to a grown woman who can do absolutely everything, and she made it look like joy the entire way. We did not just watch her grow up, we got to keep her. Brandy Norwood was the teenager who seemed to do it all at once. A hit sitcom and a hit record at the same time, Moesha on the television every week, and platinum albums on the radio, the rare child star who was a genuine A-list talent in two industries before she could legally drink. And she carried something heavier than most, the title her peers gave her, the vocal Bible, the singer's singer, a level of expectation that would crush most people. Where is she now? Still revered, still working, an artist whose influence on a whole generation of singers is almost impossible to overstate. She has toured to acclaim, including a celebrated run with her old friendly rival Monica that turned a decades-old pop moment into a victory lap. She has returned to acting in the Descendants films for a new generation of kids. She received her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and she has written her own story in a memoir. Brandy is the proof that a kid can be a prodigy in two crafts at once, and still, decades later, be standing, respected, and creating. The girl who was Moesha grew into a living legend, and she did it while carrying the weight of being called the best, which is the heaviest crown of all. Elle Fanning belongs here for a reason that doubles as a warning about how we think of child stars, because she grew up so gracefully, in such plain sight, that a lot of people never registered her as a child star at all. But she was one, a working actress from the age of 2 or 3, the little sister in a dozen films, often literally playing the younger version of her big sister Dakota. And unlike almost everyone else in this book, she made the transition from child actor to acclaimed adult actor look completely, deceptively easy. Where is she now? An Academy Award caliber leading lady at the height of her craft, a fixture of prestige cinema and television, winning over the toughest critics at the most serious festivals, choosing bold and strange and excellent roles with the confidence of someone who has been doing this her entire life, because she has. Elle Fanning is the rarest creature in this entire book, the child star who simply became a great adult actor with no detour, no breakdown, no comeback required, because she never went anywhere. She is the smooth, quiet, almost invisible version of the happy ending, and those are real, and we should celebrate them just as loudly as the dramatic ones. Part 21. The 90s Kids. Where They Landed. A whole flurry of faces from the 1990s, the ones a very specific generation will recognize in a heartbeat, and the satisfying ordinary truth of where they went. Larisa Oleynik was the queen of the 1990s tween, The Secret World of Alex Mack on Nickelodeon, and the dreamy younger sister in the beloved teen film 10 Things I Hate About You. She was on every bedroom wall and every lunchbox for a few years, and then she did the thing this book keeps celebrating. She went to Sarah Lawrence College, got an education, and stepped into a quieter, more deliberate adult career. Where is she now? A steadily working character actress with memorable runs on acclaimed shows like Mad Men, and in a perfect full-circle twist, she recently returned to Nickelodeon, the place that made her, this time playing the mom. The tween queen grew up, got smart, and came back to the kingdom as the grown-up in the room. There are worse fates than that. There are far worse fates than that. Anna Sophia Robb made a generation of kids cry as the doomed Leslie in Bridge to Terabithia, and inspired them as the real-life surfer Bethany Hamilton in Soul Surfer, a child actress who specialized in roles with real emotional weight. And she handled her own transition with unusual wisdom, prioritizing her education at a top university and choosing her projects carefully rather than chasing fame. Where is she now? A respected adult actress who moves comfortably between television, film, and serious stage work, including off-Broadway, a person who built a sturdy, thoughtful, grown-up career out of a sensitive childhood one. She is another of the quiet successes, the kid who made you feel something and then grew into an adult who kept doing exactly that on her own careful terms. Ryder Strong was Sean Hunter on Boy Meets World, the cool best friend, the heartthrob with the floppy hair that an entire generation tried to copy. And like several of his castmates, his second act is one of intelligence and reinvention. He went to college, twice, and turned toward writing and directing, the work behind the camera. Where is he now? A writer and a filmmaker, and the warm, funny co-host of the rewatch podcast Pod Meets World, alongside his old castmates, turning the show that made him into an ongoing conversation with the people who grew up on it. The cool best friend grew up into a thoughtful creator who gets to spend his days talking about the show he loved with the friends he made on it. That is a soft and lovely place to land. Tina Majorino was the child star of Waterworld, and Andre, then vanished from the spotlight as a teenager by choice, and then came roaring back as an adult in a run of beloved cult projects, the unforgettable Mac in Napoleon Dynamite, and a fan-favorite role on Veronica Mars. Where is she now? A working actress who has navigated the whole arc, child fame, a deliberate retreat, and an adult return, on her own terms, choosing the work that interests her. She is the embodiment of a pattern this book has shown you again and again. The kid who walks away to have a real adolescence and comes back stronger for it. And Ricky Schroeder belongs in the record too, because he was one of the biggest child stars of his era, the adorable rich kid on silver spoons, and then, impressively, a respected adult dramatic actor on NYPD Blue, defying the usual curse by aging into serious work. In the years since, he has stepped well back from mainstream Hollywood and become a more private and independent figure, his public life taking turns that have sometimes been the subject of debate, which this book will leave to the side. Where is he now? Out of the mainstream spotlight, recently remarried, living life on his own terms, far from the sound stages that made him. His is a reminder that the road out of child stardom does not run in a straight line, and that people are allowed to become complicated, private adults whose choices we do not have to understand, to respect their right to make them. Part 22. A few more you have been wondering about. Kieran Culkin spent his childhood being known as Macaulay's little brother, appearing alongside him in Home Alone and a string of films, the other Culkin, the one in the background. And there is no sweeter reversal in this entire book than what happened next, because the little brother grew up and quietly became one of the most acclaimed actors of his generation, entirely on his own. Where is he now? At the very top. He won an Emmy for his electric performance as Roman Roy on Succession, one of the most celebrated television shows of the era, and then, in 2025, he won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for the film A Real Pain. The kid who was the other Culkin grew up to be, by any measure, the most decorated actor in his famous family, an Oscar winner, a critic's darling, a person who turned a childhood in his brother's shadow into a singular adult career all his own. If you ever doubted that the quiet one in the back of the frame might be the one to watch, his name is Kieran Culkin, and he has the Oscar to settle the argument. Usher was a teenager when the world met him, a prodigiously gifted young singer, mentored by the biggest names in the business, releasing records before he had finished growing. And he avoided every trap that swallows a young music star and became simply one of the defining entertainers of his time. Where is he now? At the absolute peak of his powers. He completed a wildly successful Las Vegas residency, headlined the Super Bowl halftime show, one of the biggest stages on the planet, and continues to release music and to mentor the next generation the way he was once mentored. The teenage phenom grew into an elder statesman of his genre, a businessman, a showman, and a survivor of the exact pressures that have ended so many of the careers in this book. He started as a kid with a gift and a lot of grown-ups around him, and he came out the other side an icon with his crown intact. Monica came up at the very same moment as Brandy, two teenage girls with enormous voices, famously pitted against each other by a single hit song about a boy, when in truth, they were two prodigies carrying the same impossible weight at the same impossibly young age. And like Brandy, she endured, through real and public personal hardships, into a respected and enduring adulthood. Where is she now? Still recording, still beloved, and recently sharing the stage with Brandy on a celebrated joint tour that finally turned an old manufactured rivalry into a shared victory lap. Two women who survived child stardom in the music industry, standing together decades later as friends and equals. The teenager the world tried to make into someone's competition grew into a woman who got to share her flowers with the very person she was supposed to be fighting. That is the kind of ending this whole book is rooting for. Taj Mowry was a child star in his own right, not just the little brother of the famous sister-sister twins, carrying his own hit show, Smart Guy, as a kid genius skipping grades in high school and lending his voice to a beloved animated character a whole generation knows by heart, and his after-story is one of the steadiest in the new generation. Where is he now? A working adult actor who never disappeared and never crashed, with a long run on the comedy Baby Daddy and a warm return to the world that raised him in the Full House revival. A married man building an ordinary, grounded, happy adult career. The kid genius grew into one of the most drama-free success stories in this whole book. Proof that sometimes the answer to "where are they now" is the most reassuring one of all. Just fine. Still working. Still here. Joey Lawrence was the kid with the catchphrase, the one who said "whoa" on Blossom and made it a national thing. But he had already been a child star for years before that, charming the whole country as the little boy on Gimme a Break before most of us knew his name. He was the oldest of three brothers who were all child actors, a whole family of them. And his after story is one of the most durable in this book, because he simply never stopped. Where is he now? A working actor across 4 decades, a long second run as a leading man on the sitcom Melissa and Joey, a stage performer, a husband, and a father. One of those steady professionals who turned a childhood catchphrase into an actual lifelong career. The kid who said, "Whoa," grew all the way up and kept the lights on, and there is something quietly heroic about that kind of longevity. The child star who just kept working and kept being decent about it. Lacey Chabert was the youngest sister on Party of 5, crying her way into our hearts as a little girl carrying grown-up grief on a prime-time drama. And she was the voice of Eliza on a beloved cartoon. And she was one of the mean girls in the movie that quotes itself to this day. But here is where her story turns into something wonderful and unexpected. Where is she now? She became, of all the marvelous things, the reigning queen of the Hallmark Christmas movie, the warm and familiar face at the center of dozens of those cozy holiday films that millions of people watch like a tradition every single December. She found a lane that suited her exactly, made herself the heart of it, and built a happy, prolific, grounded adult career and a family out of it. The grieving little sister grew up to become the person who brings people comfort on purpose, every holiday season, year after year. If you have ever felt that particular warmth on a December night, with a movie on and the lights low, there is a real chance she was the reason. That is a beautiful place to end up. Allison Hannigan started young, a working kid in commercials and movies before she was out of her teens, and then she became part of 2 things that an entire generation holds close: the Witch Willow on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and the unforgettable Bandcamp line in the American Pie movies. 2 very different kinds of fame, the cult-beloved drama and the broad comedy, and she carried both with the same warmth. Then she did the rarest thing in this whole book. She landed a second enormous hit, 9 seasons as Lily on How I Met Your Mother, one of the most watched sitcoms of its era, which means she was a touchstone for a second generation that barely knew the first. Where is she now? Exactly where you would hope. Happily married to a fellow actor she met on Buffy, a mother raising her daughters, still working, still hosting, still turning up with that same easy warmth that made everyone love her in the first place. No scandal, no crash, no cautionary tale. Just a girl who grew up on our screens, stayed kind, stayed employed, and built the quiet, lucky, ordinary good life that this series is always secretly rooting for. Sometimes the answer to where are they now is simply happy, and that is the best answer of all. And we owe a nod to the ones who started it all, the original child stars, because the phenomenon is older than any of us. Jerry Mathers was the beaver on Leave It to Beaver, one of the very first children to grow up inside America's living rooms in the television age, the original template for everything in this book. He grew up to live a full and remarkably grounded life, served in the military reserves, worked in business, returned to performing when he felt like it, and became a gracious elder ambassador of the whole child star fraternity, proof that it was possible, even at the very beginning, to come through it whole. And Emmanuel Lewis, the tiny star of Webster, one of the most famous small children of the 1980s, has lived a largely private adult life out of the spotlight, lending his voice to projects and turning up warmly at the occasional reunion, a gentle, well-liked man who decided that a quiet life was the prize. The original kids drew the map. Some of them, it turns out, made it all the way home. Part 23, The Bravest Updates. We end the roll call with 2 of the most courageous people in this entire book, because their stories are still being written right now, and both of them have chosen, against every instinct toward privacy, to let us see the hardest parts so that someone else might feel less alone. Jake Lloyd was a little boy when he played young Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, one of the most anticipated films in the history of movies, which means he was handed, at 9 years old, a level of scrutiny and expectation that would break a grown professional. And it was hard on him, the bullying, the relentless attention, and he quietly left acting before he was a teenager. In the years that followed, he disappeared from public view, and the news that emerged was frightening. A diagnosis of schizophrenia, hospitalizations, a young man in genuine crisis. For a long time, his was the story people pointed to as the worst-case warning of what child fame can do. But that is not where his story is right now, and this is the part that matters. After a long and serious course of inpatient treatment, Jake Lloyd has, in his own recent words, been feeling pretty good. He has spoken with remarkable grace about how hitting rock bottom was what finally allowed him to honestly take part in his own treatment, take his medication, and live with his diagnosis. He has talked about being grateful to the Star Wars fans who have sent their support, and about happily playing the old Star Wars video games. Where is he now? In recovery, supported, and speaking openly to help erase the shame around mental illness. The boy the internet wrote off as a tragedy is, right now, a 35-year-old man doing the brave and unglamorous daily work of getting better. We are not just rooting for him. We are in awe of him. May the force be with him, genuinely. And Christina Applegate, who grew up in front of us as Kelly Bundy on Married with Children, the dumb blonde joke that she made into something iconic, and who then did the rarest thing of all, shedding the typecasting to become a genuinely acclaimed adult actress, brilliant in Anchorman and unforgettable in the series Dead to Me. She had already survived breast cancer, publicly and courageously, when she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a relentless and incurable disease, and she has chosen to live that diagnosis in the open, with a raw honesty that is almost hard to bear and impossible not to admire. She has been unflinching about how brutal it is, the pain, the loss of independence, the days she cannot leave the house, and she put it all into a memoir. Where is she now? Facing the hardest fight of her life with a candor and a black humor that have made her, improbably, one of the most inspiring figures in Hollywood. Not despite the illness, but because of how honestly she carries it. The girl who made us laugh as a teenager is now teaching a watching world something far more important than comedy, about courage, about telling the truth when the truth is awful, about being seen on the worst days and not just the best ones. She is the bravest grown-up in this entire book. We love her. We are pulling for her, and we are listening. A word for the listener. So there they are, the kids we grew up with, found and accounted for, the lucky ones, and the hurt ones, and the ones who walked away, and the ones who are still walking. If there is one thing to carry out of the last little while we have spent together, let it be this. The child on the screen was always a person. We knew that, and we forgot it, over and over, for decades. Every time we froze them at the age we loved them and got annoyed that they dared to grow older. They grew older. They became photographers and writers and racers and watchmakers and parents and advocates and, in a few cases, simply private people who wanted nothing more from us than to be allowed to go. Some of them paid a price for our entertainment that we are only now old enough to understand. The least we can do all these years later is to remember them kindly, to root for the ones still climbing, to leave the ones who left in peace, and to be a little gentler the next time we see a famous kid on a screen, knowing what we now know about the long road after the cameras move on. And here is the quiet thing this whole long walk has taught me, the thing I did not expect when we started. We came here, all of us, to find out what happened to them. But somewhere in the middle of it, around the time we met the woman who became a space executive, and the boy who waited 40 years for his Oscar, and the man building watches after the cameras turned away, it stopped being only about them. Because their stories are our stories, just lived louder and earlier and in front of more people. We all peeked at something once and had to figure out what came next. We all got frozen in somebody's memory at an age we have long outgrown. We all have a version of ourselves that the world thinks it knows, that is years out of date. The child star just lives that universal thing at 1,000 times the volume, with the whole world keeping score. And when we ask where they are now, what we are really asking, underneath, is whether it is possible to be more than the best thing you ever did when you were young. Whether you can be hurt by the spotlight and still heal. Whether you can walk away from the thing everyone wanted you to be and build something truer. And the answer, on the evidence of all these lives, is yes. Not always, and not without cost, and not for everyone. But yes, the kid on the screen got to grow up. So did you. So did I. So the next time you are flipping channels late at night and a face from your childhood goes by, or a song you wore out at 12 comes on the radio, do not just feel that little pang of where did the time go. Send the kid a little kindness across the years. They were working while you were playing. They gave you something, some comfort, or some laugh, or some feeling of being a little less alone on a school night, and most of them paid for it in ways you are only now old enough to understand. Wish them well, wherever they are. And then, while you are at it, wish it for yourself too. The kid you used to be, the one frozen in an old photograph, who also turned out to be so much more than that one moment everyone remembers. Thank you for taking this walk back with us. Be good to the people you grew up with, the ones you knew, and the ones you only watched. We will see you on the next one. Books by Barron. Where Are They Now? A Note on Respect and Language. This book profiles real people using only public published information. Where a subject has experienced illness, addiction, legal trouble, or loss, those moments are referenced with restraint and without sensational detail, and contested allegations are identified as contested. The aim throughout is dignity, not exposure. A note on sources. Everything here is drawn from public interviews, reputable reporting, public records, and the subject's own published statements about their lives. Where the record is silent or disputed, this telling says so rather than guessing. About the Where Are They Now series. Books by Barron's Where Are They Now? Series follows the people who once lived in our living rooms and on our screens, and asks the question time always leaves behind, what happened to them next? Each episode is built on the public record and told with respect. Disclosure. This program is a work of independent biography and commentary, produced by Books, by Barron, and written by Barron Darby. It is based entirely on publicly available information, including news reporting, interviews, public records, and the subject's own public statements. It is not authorized by, endorsed by, or affiliated with any of the individuals profiled, or with their families, representatives, estates, or the studios, networks, and labels associated with their work. Where this program reflects interpretation or opinion, that interpretation is the author's own and is offered as commentary. Every effort has been made to treat each person, living and deceased, and their families with accuracy, fairness, and dignity. Names, titles, and trademarks referenced remain the property of their respective owners and are used here only for the purposes of commentary, criticism, and historical discussion. If you are someone profiled here or someone who loves them and you believe anything in this program is in error, Books by Barron welcomes the correction. Thank you for listening. We will see you on the next one. Books by Barron. Where are they now?